when you face a moment when you really have to survive, your idea of yourself changes completely. We never really talked about it. You know, the matter of honor is central in the police, for example. When we've been talking and interviewing and speaking with a lot of Italian policemen and carabinieri, and you know, for them, the honesty is something very central in the choice they made. Here you see that. So, I mean, it's true that, as you said, there's a controversy, but at the same time, you see that happening. So I don't really have to take care of that, because you're taking care of that as an audience. So what I have to take care of is the fact that a friend of mine, that I decided to call and to involve in this situation, died. I feel responsible for my friend. That is already like honesty and honor. Thus, for them, for example, to be considered dishonest is one of the biggest offense you can have. And they use an Italian word that is infame, infamous.
La stessa cosa in portoghese.
You know, if you label somebody with that name, there's no bigger offense you can give them. And he has to when he sees the gun in his friend's hands, it's really something that's very strong for him. Mm-hmm. And from that moment on, we understand that he might even lose track of what his survival might be, because he feels he has to pay debt to the guy who spent so many nights together. Only them. I mean, they are the only ones who really understand what they're doing in that car for 7 hours, 8 hours.
Yes.
Not even their families. Their families, accompany them to that thing. But then in the end, you're in the same car for years and with the same guy. He's the guy who knows everything about me, much more than my wife, than my mother, than my father. I became another man, and when he was here, sitting aside, he became another guy with me in those nights. It's a part of you that's dying. So it's not hard to think that you have to pay debt to something you feel responsible for.
I understand.
And this story about a professional, who is retiring, has many various interpretations in the world of cinema. I immediately thought of the movie The Pledge by Sean Penn, with Jack Nicholson, who also, there was a small city and he was a cop, I think, and he was retiring, but somebody gets killed and he has to finish the job before he gets retired. And I wonder to the director first, ANDREA DI STEFANO, from where did you get inspiration for this story? Because we know many directors, like, for example, Matteo Garrone and others who deal with that kind of underground world in Italy. And from where did you get the idea for this movie? And for PIERFRANCESCO, what do you think is the biggest lesson that you learned not as an actor but as a person who has lived in Italy about this movie, and where do you think is the problem with this kind of stories and this kind of real situations that everybody has to deal with or has heard at some point in his life about those situations?
I got the idea to write the film by chance. I was speaking to a police officer, and he was showing me different cases of crime scenes. And on one, he said, "I know a few of my colleagues knew exactly what happened, but I had to be there." And so I thought, well, it would be interesting to be a police officer and walk towards a crime scene with people dead on the ground, and you knew exactly what happened because you were part of the criminal event. So I always had this walk that is in the movie now in the beginning when he walks towards the crime scene. It was always something that it was my first inspiration. And then, you know, I'm there to write the script and make people happy. You know, it's like I'm a prostitute with a typewriter. So it's like, you know, one night, last night, everything makes it more.
Narrow.
Yeah. So the only inspiration was how much I can make the people enjoy the ride. You know, it's like roller coaster. You scream, people scream and shout, and they touch their hair, and kids cry. I see it with my kids. But then when it's over, can we go again? In movies, I think you don't have to be scared if you attach to a real emotion, because roller coasters are real emotions, to bring them on a ride, and then if you can compress it as much as possible with all these elements, the better it is.
Well, I don't know if I learned anything about me as a person. I learned a lot about the world we were portraying. You know, you have an idea of somebody or some worlds, and then you step into them and you start rethinking everything out of the experience you're doing. And it's been very interesting to have the chance to talk to these people. And we underestimate a lot what they do. In Italy, they're paid very badly. I mean, they can make like 1,200 to 1,800 after 30 years of work. You live in Milan. Go get a pizza in Milan. It's 40 euros for a pizza and a glass of wine, a beer. Have a family, have kids, divorce, have another girl, a young one, younger than you. Milan is a city where, you know, wealthiness is around you, and it shows off with no problem. So I mean, you have Lamborghinis on the street. You're driving with your little car, and you have to follow them. And you have Lamborghinis, you have Ferraris, you have Porsche, you have models, you have fashion, you have design, you have everything's rich around you. And still you are the guy who's supposed to give security to all the people around you, and this is how much you're paid. You know, it's illegal to have a second job for them. It's illegal. But everybody does it. Everybody has to. So, and he's the guy who sticks to the idea that that's the only thing he had to do. Yes, he escorts his cousin, his wife's cousin, for 50 euros, 100 euros, once every couple of weeks. I done myself the bodyguard when I was a kid. Bodyguard and security to the concerts. And I was surrounded by policemen and carabinieri, and I was paid like 40 euros. 40 euros.
And has anything changed
Since then?
since then?
No, it's still illegal.
Still,
It's still illegal. It's a big issue. I think that, you know, in a democracy, in my opinion, those people and teachers
yeah.
should be the ones who gets paid more. And once you have doctors, teachers, and people of the security that are paid so that they can be focused in what they do. How can you work like 20 hours per day and then be focused on what you do? Because they can work at night if they do bodyguards or if they do security in the clubs. They go to sleep at 4 and then they have to wake up at 7 and then be on the street. And get yelled by people, say, you should leave me free and do what I want to do. So what has changed is, possibly my point of view on that aspect, that kind of life. Not that I've always respected them, not that I disrespected them before. Then of course there are occasions where and they do as well, where they can point at corrupted people by saying, you know, the fact that you're corrupted is giving an idea of the entire army as corrupted, and they're angrier than us when they talk about that.
But even to deal with serious topics, do you agree that the film title is also ironical? And was there also an alternative film title? Also, I love the film title, Last Night of Amore. When I read it first, I expected, because I don't read the synopsis, just looked on his name, PIERFRANCESCO is in it, and
You
So it was a romantic comedy.
no,
or
But,
a retired porn actor.
yeah, maybe this.
No, it was, of course. I love the fact that you could mistaken the film into something else, but I believe this is a love story too, the movie.
See.
It's you know, sometimes when you make romantic movies, you build events so you can show that two people really love each other. This film, you bring the temperature of two people, real core of how much they care about each other, in a very
Harsh way.
in very harsh way, but very quickly you understand what they talk about, and it's you understand also the depth of their love story by their ability to tell each other, fuck you, go fuck yourself, oh shut up, da, 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 da. And then the next scene they back to loving each other, like, you know, real life.
There is something amazing in the film. The fact that it's we could define it as a pure genre film, as a thriller. The action is there, the thrilling is there, and I think there is a kind of a connection with the specific and strong tradition of thrillers that are the American thrillers from the 80s, Lethal Weapon, for example. But there is another point that I think, although the fun is there, the roller coaster is there, I believe there is a discussion, since the main character is somebody who is about to retire, I have the sensation that it's also a movie about the art of getting old. Not only getting old of tired of your profession, the time to stop, but how to deal with the physicality of being old. I would like to share this impression with you as a question. How do you think Amore is a measure of aging, of time, and how do you reflect that sensation of the character into your own lives? Are you prepared to getting old? When I mean getting old, not only physically, but on your professions. You are artists. What's the measure of aging for an artist?
That's interesting. I think that we spoke a lot about that. We never thought that this guy about to retire was like saddened by the idea of abandoning his life. He's got plans for the future. They have plans for the future. They're thinking about it. Of course, he's living something he's living his life. His life as it's been for 35 years, it's ending in a night. And he's preparing this speech, trying to find the right words, just to be at the level of that ritual, you know. I think he's scared to age a little bit because he might lose his younger wife. So he has to be at the pace of the younger guy, of the younger wife. You know, she has so much energy. She's still beautiful and fresh. You don't want her to betray you. You don't want her to go away. And you're remarried. You found that girl that's 20 years younger than you. You know, you have to keep the pace high. And so you can see that on how he dresses himself, the choices he makes, his earring. You know, he wants to pretend to be younger. But then in the end, I have a feeling that he doesn't really care for that in terms of being scared of aging. He's not at that point. I mean, we met him maybe 2 days later. He would have started thinking about that, but not in that moment. And then if you ask me, I have to say that the more I grow, the more I think I resemble myself. I think that there's an honesty in the process of, I'm talking about being an actor, of course, and there's an honesty in the growth I've made that I've always tried to care for, that is taking me to gaining my face, you know? So what you see looks like what's inside. And I'm quite proud of that. Then, of course, it's something sometimes I think of, like, you know, how did it come that I became 53 all of a sudden? Wasn't I 35 yesterday? Mm-hmm. Now I have 53 years old, and I don't feel that. And then I speak to my mother, she's 92, and she said, you know, I feel like I'm 60. Oh, fuck, this is real. So, I really like watching old actors when they've grown with when they've fed their work with honesty. There's nothing more beautiful than an actor who's let himself age with fun, honesty, acceptance, tolerance for what he can't do anymore. And generationally, sad enough to say, I think that we will have more roles than before, because all of our society is getting old, and it's getting older than it used to be before. That means that I think that there will be more roles for older people mm-hmm. than there are now, because the audience will be as old as you are, and most of the time the audience wants to see herself portrayed on screen. So I think we belong to a generation where you're going to be like more actors playing roles of old people than it is now.
And do you have a favorite cop thriller that influenced you both for this film, or another film must not be a cop thriller? Some influences can talk about as a director.
No, yeah, it's funny because I'm fascinated when I have other directors that are able so fast to say, "Oh, that film inspired me for this film." I recognize moments in movies that I love when I see exactly the moment that an action of the character comes in and becomes something narratively of quality. I find that some of the most recent thrillers coming from Taiwan, Korea, Hong Kong were very, very free, very freeing. Also in the way they look at Parasite. You know, it's a movie that you have extreme drama and comedy put together in a very craftful way. So I don't have a specific movie. I have a lot of influences that I love. I'm very Italian as a director.
Just a follow-up to your question. There is something very strong in the way you direct, because the rhythm is there, the violence is there, but it's not as noisy as the average thriller that we are accustomed to. You have a very specific and, I would say, poetic respect for silence. This is a question I'd like to share with you. What does silence represent to you as a director, as a means to discover your characters, to investigate your characters?
No, I think silence is when the audience investigates themselves, because I can put a line of music, I can put something of sound design, I can put, so the audience feel like, oh, this means something, or this is because that's happening, this. But if you take away everything from storytelling and you have images on the screen, then all of a sudden the audience feels like there is a void, and they're trying to find ways, and the only truthful thing they can grasp to is their emotions. And I think it's a kind of like pleasure and uncomfortable at the same time. Italian movies were great when you would have, you know, Fellini would put only the sound of wind. Totally absurd, but the end of La Dolce Vita when the kid says, and the protagonist is, for him, is silence, but it leaves you in a situation of like, you understand everything, because the movie you're finishing it by yourself. Is not the director finishing the movie for you.
And correct me if I'm wrong. You're both born in. You were both born in Rome, yes.
Yeah.
And it's a more curious question in relation to the film. The film is called L'ultima notte di amore, but I'm wondering if you had in your days in Rome as young kids or young people, if you've witnessed these kind of situations, or if you had a night that you that had a little bit of the intensity in the film. And also a follow-up to that, when The Godfather in '72 arrives in the cinemas, many people liked and sympathized with the character of the Godfather of Marlon Brando, which is objectively criminal. And I'm wondering, for example, the movie by Garone and Gomorrah, these two young people. I'm wondering what is your perception of the kids in Italy. Do they sympathize with the bad guys in your movie, or do you think they will sympathize with the good person? Yes, with yes, with
Policeman. Oh, it's a policeman.
yes, with the policeman.
I think that Amore is not forcefully good and honest. I mean, it's much more. There's much more gray zones in his way and what he does. He's also very smart. But is he betraying his friend? Is he lying here and there? He's trying to survive. You know, when you're trying to survive, you just, you know, all of the fuel that's there, all of the gasoline you can use, even if you ignore you have it, you're going to use it. Surviving is really, when you face the moment when you really have to survive, your idea of yourself changes completely. You might think, I'm a peaceful man. And then all of a sudden, when somebody, you know, puts a gun in your face, are you still able not to shoot anybody? This is why I think I like the movie. When we always have a definition of ourselves that it's peaceful, and you know, we all are very honest. Are we truly? Are we in the conditions where we are forced to understand if we really are honest or not? And this is what the story is about. So I think you can empathize with this, with the fact that until you won't know what's going to push you to the limit, until you won't know where the stake is going to raise, until that point you can think of yourself something. But then when you have to face that stake, your thoughts about you change completely. I had that feeling in my life. In a couple of situations, to answer your question, I found myself, I had to rely in energies I didn't know I had. I risked my life without knowing that I was risking my life, for reasons I didn't know, and I knew it before, and I knew it after. And when I think back to the moment, I said, so somebody could have shot me and I didn't know. Or doing the bodyguard, you know, you're there and shit might happen. I've been boxing for 7 years. When I stopped boxing because I knew I could hurt people. Because when you do boxing, you know you can hurt people. When you don't do it, you can fight because you think you're cool. But then when you know how to do that, You stop doing that. But I found myself in situations where I thought I was a man, and then I understood I was another kind of man. So, well, I think youngsters might be easily fascinated by an idea of breaking the rules. You know, I'm cool because your rules are not my rules. It's easy to think that, but then you grow. Then you have, if you're not following the rules, you pay for that thing. It's up to us, though. It's up to us to point out what is fiction, what is reality, what's best for you. So, personally, I have a school. I mean, I care a lot for youngsters. And I try to give them all the useful tools I can to give themselves a voice. We have to let young people have their voice. And we will be surprised by how many things they think. Otherwise, they might be frustrated. Otherwise, they might become violent. Otherwise, they might think that, you know, the shortcut is the easiest street to take. Instead of, you know, being responsible for your voice and having to say things I can understand. It's not easy, but you can do that.
I'd like to ask you something, if possible. The Berlinale ends tonight. The releases of films end tonight. It's the last big release of this Berlinale, and it's very symbolic to have as the last film a film that came from a country that gave us spaghetti western, peplum, gialli, the tradition of kind of popular reinvention of genres. I would like to share this as a question to you. How do you see a country that developed Sergio Leone, Dario Argento, Bud Spencer, Terence Hill, all those symbolic figures of those branches of popular and maybe B movies, but that became cult movies? What is new? How is to be a force of resilience and resistance in this branch of Italian cinematographic industry?
Today?
Yeah.
I think that Italy is the capital of the world of prototypes. There's no industry. You can find mad brains that all of a sudden think they have a logic and they impose it on other people. And if you see the stories of all our great directors, they're all prototypes. You cannot reproduce.
Yeah.
It's very hard. Even the one that you can think that the most similar to one another, like Bonicelli and Comencini, they were very different the way they would approach the storytelling. So I think that it's part of being in a country like Italy that makes you grow up and find ways to adapt to things, and then all of a sudden somebody gets banged in the head and sees things differently and they start trying to reproduce them in a way. So we can, you know, hope that some kid is gonna start filming soon and creates the new movement. But I strongly believe that it's part of our culture, and it somehow has an elected friendship with cinema and storytelling by images. Storytelling by images in general has been always something that Italians were kind of drawn to, paintings. And funny enough, we didn't have a group of romanzieri.
Mm-hmm.
Like for us, structure thoughts in length was never our ability, but if you had to like concentrate the vision and make an iconic image, we would always find somebody crazy enough to spend, maybe because as attention span deficit, little time, do something, and we do the best. But if you ask somebody to write a romanzo, life, it's too hectic in Italy to be able to have that luxury. Okay? Thank you very much.